In the early morning of June 12, 2016, Omar Mir Siddiq Mateen, a 29-year-old American Muslim, the son of Afghan immigrants, fired into the gay nightclub known as Pulse in Orlando, Florida. I heard about the attack late that night, but when I heard Obama's address to America, I had to speak out and write up also a follow-up to my thoughts on gun violence video from months ago. The nightclub was a gun-free zone. The terrorist knew this. He entered the club and opened fire with no hesitation, being met with no resistance until, after a 3-hour hostage standoff, was finally brought down by a SWAT police team. The death count was 50 and at least 53 wounded as of my writing the script. So President Barack Obama said, "It is clear that this was an act of terror and an act of hate." No, really? I don't think anyone believes that someone walks in on a gathering of people and starts slaughtering them with feelings of love, or indifference, or casual curiosity. This could have been any one of our communities. Yeah, and there will certainly be a lot more, unless we actually start fighting back and stop wussing out on calling it what it is. It is radical Islamic terrorism. Say the name, Obama. It is inspired, motivated, and encouraged by Islam. The reality is that the Islamic State has declared that their goal is the creation of a worldwide caliphate. Worldwide. They believe that homosexuality is illegal and homosexuals deserving of execution. Their scripture calls for the slaughter of non-believers wherever they meet them. And yet America is the homophobic culture when a few people, a few churches, simply don't want to cater to gay weddings. Some believe that homosexuality is immoral, and they may openly say that. Some Christians, some atheists, some, people all over America, some hold that view, and it's actually been getting less and less. They're becoming more and more the minority. And they don't go out assaulting or murdering the gays and lesbians in their communities. People have suspected President Obama of being a Muslim sympathizer to the cause, or even a closet Muslim himself. And to be honest, I have to say it's not looking like that is impossible. If he's not, then he is at least an incredible coward who cannot even admit that we are at war. We are. He really does sound like a lawyer defending Islamic terrorism. And if you've listened to my other recent videos, you know how I feel about lawyers in the government. The president, the head of the United States government, which is supposed to defend the American people, is defending the people who have declared war on American tolerance, culture, and people. And he blames guns. I'm planning to do a whole other video about the gun control issue along with my younger brother sometime soon, but I will say a little bit about it for now. Let me quote Obama again. "The place was more than a nightclub. It was a place of solidarity and empowerment, where people have come together to raise awareness, to speak their minds, and to advocate for their civil rights." I don't think the people felt very empowered while they were running for their lives, having no arms to defend themselves with, in a state of mass confusion and fear, and with their phones and the phones on the murdered ringing with their families, calling to ask, "Are you safe? Are you still alive?" Also, Barack Obama has really not been a particularly successful activist on civil rights and race relations between Americans, regardless of his delusion to the contrary. Again, he says, "This is a reminder of how easy it is in this country for someone to get their hands on a firearm with which to shoot people in." Yeah, for example, a school, a bar, or a nightclub. Oh, yeah, and also, equally, no, not equally, more easy than it is to get a gun, far more easy, is to find a target location where guns are not allowed, and thus no one has a way of defending themselves against such an assailant. Imagine, if you will, if just 10 or 5% of the people in Pulse, in that gay bar, had access to a firearm. Not even forget carrying it on themselves, just access to one at the bar, or imagine if there were a few weapons stashed somewhere for people to defend themselves. 5% of 300 is 15. Sorry. There were around 300 people in the club that night. Okay, let's say 5% of them, 15, had a firearm. The shooter could have been stopped far more quickly, and the death toll would have been far, far less. I can't say it would have been 0, but every time you have to wait for the police to respond and stop the killer by the time that they can respond, the bodies are piling and piling up. The floor is awash in blood. Orlando Police Chief John Mina said, "It appears he was organized and well prepared." Well, yeah, the vast majority of these mass shooters plan their attacks weeks and often many months in advance. That's no surprise. Omar's parents say they were surprised that their son was so religious, that they had no idea what he was up to. And yet, Islam encourages the lying to non-believers in order to further the Muslim mission and to appear strong and intimidating in the face of their enemies. Now, a lot of people will talk about the Middle Eastern anger at America stemming from the Iraq War, the American involvement, the invasion and occupation that never should have happened, the overthrowing of Saddam Hussein. And a lot of that is true enough. But first of all, the Iraq War was in response to the 9/11 attacks, which were carried out on planes, where the terrorists had box cutter knives, where there was airplanes are a gun-free zone. No one there could defend themselves. And 9/11 itself, that has a whole other history going far back of the wars, wars with and in the Middle East. It was also in response to the belief that they had, or at least were building, weapons of mass destruction, which Saddam Hussein himself had told America that he had weapons of mass destruction, as far as I can remember. And America may have too easily believed that, but guess what? So did the rest of the world. It was not America's mistake alone. Again, the lying to non-believers in order to appear tough. The world fell for this. ISIS spokesman Abu Muhammad al-Anani said in May 2016, Ramadan, the month of conquest of jihad, get ready to make it a month of calamity everywhere for the non-believers. War against the non-believers again. Police spokesman David Prescopio said during a conference call with federal law enforcement officers, we learned that Omar, during his rampage, pled allegiance to ISIS and referenced the Sarney brothers, the Boston Marathon bombers. Also Muslims whose parents were asylum seekers. Come over claiming to be asylum seekers. How many of them are really doing it in the name of the goal of creating the Islamic Caliphate? The couple who carried out the San Bernardino mass shooting also radicalized Muslims who allied themselves with ISIS. I wonder if there's a pattern here. No. These must be all isolated incidents, not tied with a belief system at all, even though its leaders and recruiters have made their war on Western culture and values very much clear. No. The definition of a phobia is an irrational fear or aversion to something. The recognition of a people and a religion's declaration of war against our culture, with even non-participants doing very little to help in our investigation of its radical populations, of its radicalized populations, of reports of suspicious or dangerous activity. And after repeated mass killings in the name of the faith, is not irrational at all. This is reality. There was a police officer who once worked with Omar Motin who said he would frequently make homophobic and racist comments, and even began stalking him and talking of killing people to the point where he had to quit. He just couldn't take this from Omar anymore. He had brought the issue to his employer several times, but his employer did nothing because Omar was a Muslim. You know, that also reminds me of the neighbors of the San Bernardino killers, who observed suspicious activity and deliveries being made to their house, but who also said nothing because they were afraid of being called racists and Islamophobes. Now, I've heard of the possibility that being put out there that Omar frequented the gay bar because he was struggling with possible homosexual feelings himself and felt torn between those and his religion. I don't know how credible that claim is, but let's say it's true. Well, Christians may speak out against homosexuality, and I have no love for Christianity myself, but there is not a Christian country today that puts its gays and lesbians to death, while at least 10 Muslim countries do. let's say Omar was struggling with homosexual feelings or an identity crisis with his religion. Right, let's just say for argument that's true. Let's say he wanted to prove he was straight or prove he was tough to his friends, his religion, Let's, for argument, give it some credibility. That still means he carried out the mass murder in the name of allegiance to Islam. This religion, this culture that keeps no separation between church and state, that still practices the execution of homosexuals, infidels, and apostates, which means apostates means anyone who leaves the faith. That practices child marriages and honor killings, quite an array of attributes very incompatible with American culture and values, has declared war on all of us. And if we do not fight back, start protecting our own people, controlling our borders, while at the same time stop fucking with the Middle East on their own soil and the rest of the world, we will fall. If we do not get much, much smarter and more realistic about this. We don't have the time, and we certainly don't have the peacetime anymore to be wusses. People who dare to say that they support a ban on Muslim immigration are identically to Omar's co-worker or to the neighbors of the San Bernardino killers. Identically to them are called Islamophobes and racists and vilified. And yet the attacks from radical Islamic terrorists keep coming and coming and coming. There will be another and another and another. There will. Some time ago, my family had a discussion about this. And even though I didn't like the idea of a ban on Muslim immigration, I well knew, looking at the state of the world, that it may come to that. And me even saying that much, that little bit, that it may come to that, was so offensive to several of my family members who are on the left, that the conversation went literally no further before turning into a blowout. Well, it looks like it's coming to that. Looks like it has come to that once we actually get to the controlling of our borders. It doesn't mean I like it. No one likes what they have to do in wartime, but the realists recognize it for what it is. We are at war. It is no longer a phobia. It is reality.